This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Jim bloody Carrey. Throughout the 90s, Jim Carrey absolutely dominated Hollywood. And your boy Jim went from a homeless college dropout.
And a lot of people don't know this, but when I was about 14 or 15, my father lost his job and I actually became homeless for quite some time.
Into the highest paid actor in Hollywood. But you see, as Jim Carrey achieved everything that he ever wanted, ascending to the heights of success, fame, and wealth, he realized that deep down he felt empty.
It feels like a low level of despair you live in.
I wanted to find the most meaningless thing that I could come to and join, and here I am.
I believe that I had to accomplish a bunch of things that look like success in order to give up my attachment to those things.
So where I hang out with Buddha and Krishna and, all those guys.
This is the Jim Carrey story.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Feeling a little strange tonight, and I'm not sure why.
So we're going to start this story just at the moment that Jim Carrey blew up into fame. And that would be at age 19 in 1981. So Jim Carrey grew up in Canada, and he'd done a bunch of stand-up sets, but he was never very successful. But it would be at age 19 where Jim Carrey would open for a rock band called Godot. So Jim Carrey walks on stage and stares at a crowd of very straight-faced, all-black, long-hair rock fans, and he tries to do his comedy. Obviously, it was pretty brutal. He got completely booed off stage, and his comedy career wasn't looking very good. But that would all change in April of 1982. After this photo of him appeared in the Toronto Star, with a picture of him doing an impression of Sammy Davis Jr.
Right on, man. But it's Trudeau.
Despite bombing in front of audiences, there were people that were starting to notice that this man had some talent. Something was unique about him, and he started to appear on front pages and articles of different magazines, with one in particular saying Jim Carrey prepares for fame. He just has this unbelievable charisma, this incredible energy and aura around him. But you see, on top of this, there was something else that was very unique about Jim Carrey, and that was his ability to do impressions.
His name is Jim Carrey. He's an impressionist. Here's his unique brand of comedy, Jim Carrey.
She reaches down and gets 2 cubes from her bosom. Wet.
Word had spread of this weird Canadian man whose face could morph and completely transform into someone else. One of the early videos that you'll see of Jim Carrey is an evening at the Improv. It was in 1981, and this is where we'd see him do some of his famous characters, one being Sammy Davis Jr. and another being Tom Jones. And so in 1983, Jim Carrey would have his first ever appearance on national television.
This young man is a young impressionist from Toronto and a little bit different.
And that would be on the Carson Show. He walks on stage and you can kind of feel that the audience is a little bit apprehensive.
Hello, my name is Jim Carrey. I'd like to do some impressions for you tonight, if you'll just give me a minute.
Ladies and gentlemen.
And it was just insane how he could really embody their whole persona. Not just the voice, not just the singing, the dancing. He could literally just change his entire mannerisms to become these characters.
Jack Nicholson. James Dean. Clint Eastwood.
His ability to completely change his face is quite a unique one. Well, there was one place where Jim Carrey discovered this strange, unique gift. And that place was the mirror.
I think I've probably spent my entire life staring in the mirror. I have.
You see, growing up, Jim Carrey was a loner. He wasn't the most social guy. He didn't have a lot of friends. So I guess one day he was so bored, he just looked in the mirror and started making faces, like kids do. Jim Carrey once said that, "I spent most of my time in the room staring at the mirror. I never knew I was supposed to socialize. I just spent hours making faces at myself, having a good time." And I imagine when you spend hours looking in the mirror, pulling faces, you start to get good at it. And so as he grew up and he built up some confidence, he would start to use these skills when he was in school to make his classmates, his teachers laugh.
And I did this wacky Three Stooges type of dance, whoop, 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 all over the place. And she was rolling on the ground and the class went crazy.
You see, Jim Carrey's comedy didn't just spawn from wanting to be a class clown. He wasn't just trying to make friends at school. There was actually something much deeper going on.
You have such an incredible talent for physical comedy. Where did that come from?
Desperation.
Desperation?
I had a sick mom, man. I wanted to make her feel better.
You see, Jim Carrey's mom was very depressed, and she became addicted to painkillers. And so Jim felt this need to try and put a smile on her face. And one of the main reasons for his mother's depression was to do with what was going on in the family. You see, Jim Carrey's father was originally an accountant. You know, he had a decent job, they had a home. However, very sadly, he lost his job, and in turn, he ended up losing the home.
And a lot of people don't know this, but when I was about 14 or 15, my father lost his job, and I actually became homeless for quite some time.
At just age 16, Jim Carrey had to drop out of school because effectively he needed to look after his family. And this was a very dark time for Jim Carrey. But you see, it would be in this darkness where Jim Carrey had a realization.
I learned many great lessons from my father, not the least of which was that you can fail at what you don't want. So you might as well take a chance on doing what you love.
Sparking him to pursue his dream of a career in entertainment. Prior to all of this, Jim Carrey had actually started doing stand-up at just age 15, where he had no success. I mean, understandably, he's 15 years old, would you expect? The owner of Yuck Yucks, which was his comedy club he would go to, he described Jim Carrey as a bad little Richard. But this brings us back to the 80s, where Jim Carrey's life would change forever.
This is his first appearance on American television. Would you welcome Jim Carrey?
I think you got a good shot.
As I mentioned, he started to do the rounds on TV. He had loads of appearances, and people just really wanted to see him do these impressions. They loved it. But something was wrong. Jim Carrey had become pigeonholed. They didn't know him as Jim Carrey, the really good comedian that everyone loves. They knew him as Jim Carrey, the guy who does impressions of people that everyone loves. And look, we can't underplay how successful he was as an impressionist in the 80s. It was really big at home in Canada, but also starting to grow a career in America. He was the opening act for Rodney Dangerfield. In fact, he even played his first film role in 1981. And the character in that he played was a struggling comedian who was a, you guessed it, impressionist.
And what you get? Hot water. Thank you very much. You guys have been great.
I can get 2,000 people down, and I will still be saying to the world that those people are more interesting than me. It's just not true, you know?
So you threw your act out?
I threw it out.
Before we continue with this video, I want to give a massive shout out to today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the ultimate platform for building your own professional, gorgeous looking website. Making a website can be quite intimidating, it sounds very technical, but Squarespace has made a platform that's easy to use and very quick that will give you a professional, amazing looking website. With tons of templates to choose from, you can just pick whatever one you like and customize it exactly to fit what it is you do. Now, whatever you do, maybe you're a freelancer, photographer, maybe you make custom socks. No matter the business, Squarespace has got you covered. Whenever I've needed to make a website myself, I've always used Squarespace. And I can't lie, it's actually quite enjoyable to do. There's loads of built-in features as well, such as email marketing, e-commerce, appointment scheduling. That'll just take your website to that next level. So be sure to check out squarespace.com/Jimmy the Giant. And to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain, use the code Jimmy the Giant. Anyway, back to the video.
His friends thought he was crazy, but he went back into the comedy clubs and started over, doing improv.
And of course, very often, he bombed.
People screaming at me to do my old act or getting actually violent. It was a crazy experiment, but it was so good because it made me comfortable with the creative process.
I could just fire out and hit him right now.
And so with this new attitude and new vision, Jim Carrey would enter the decade that would change everything, the 90s.
Oh my God! What happened by accident?
In 1990, Jim Carrey would appear in a show called In Living Color. In Living Color really showed Jim Carrey's actual abilities. His abilities beyond just doing impressions, but his skill for embodying and embracing a character and transforming himself entirely.
Rest your neck. She tried so hard. Oh yeah! Turbo engine! Like so!
And so by this point in the 90s, Jim Carrey had a very, very reasonable portfolio behind him, and it was just a matter of time before he would get his big break. And there would be one year, in particular, that everything would change. 1994.
One more thing, Lieutenant.
I don't know how he did it, but in 1 year, the boy had 3 box hit bumpers. February 4th, Ace Ventura. July 29th, The Mask. December 16th, Dumb and Dumber. I don't know what happened in 1994, but the Chinese calendar had it down as the year of Jim Carrey. These films grossed over $700 million. The world had finally seen exactly what Jim Carrey was capable of. Very quickly, the title of the $20 million man had started floating around Hollywood.
You laugh that way because you know you're wealthy. Is that
very wealthy? And that's
odd.
That's how wealthy people laugh.
I wouldn't have guessed.
He became the highest paid actor when he earned $20 million to play Cable Guy. And bear in mind for a second that the Cable Guy's budget was $47 million. Jim Carrey got half of that. More and more roles kept coming.
Carbon-based life form.
You met her at the Christmas parties?
We'll have to circle around.
Well, that's because you have big jugs.
Anything that Jim Carrey did was pretty much a money printer. The Cable Guy, Liar Liar, Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, and Batman Forever. And it would be in these films where you'd really see Jim Carrey's range, his ability to just be different people.
I thought you'd never ask.
Prenuptial agreements! This contract is void!
But even with all of this success, all of this proof that Jim Carrey can do lots of different things, still, people tried to put a limit on his abilities. I want to take a quick moment just to say that I have started a podcast with my mates called the Afters Podcast.
What is wrong with that?
I'm exactly. I'm super proud of it. Really happy. I love this format. I've been able to talk as myself, not scripted. So if you like the stuff I talk about here, definitely join us on the podcast where we talk about it and debate about it much more. Anyway. Once again, people tried pigeonholing him as the wacky comedian, the guy that can only play outlandish, wild comedy characters. But then Jim Carrey managed to defy all of those limitations in 1998 with the release of The Truman Show.
Tell me what's happening!
Well, you're having a nervous breakdown. That's what's happening.
Through the 90s and into the 2000s, Jim Carrey continued to dominate the film industry. He appeared in endless classics and made tons of characters that will no doubt be remembered forever. But behind the scenes, there had become a very deep rift in Jim Carrey's life.
It feels like a low level of despair you live in, where you're not getting any answers, but you're living okay, and you can smile at the office, you know?
I believe that I had to become a famous, idea and get all the stuff that people dream about, accomplish a bunch of things that look like success in order to give up my attachment to those things.
So where I hang out with Buddha and Krishna and, all those guys.
And so naturally, Jim had turned to spirituality. He started going to the different churches, trying the different prayers, the meditations, reading different books.
I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Christian, I'm whatever you want me to be.
Probably consuming different substances, all in the hope to find the answers. The big questions. Who am I? What am I? Where am I? And he wanted to answer this deep question inside of himself of why does he always need to be seen, heard, and loved by other people? Why is he so needy for that feeling?
How's life? Everything good? It's so beautiful. It really is, especially when I'm absent from it.
And by the 2010s, Jim Carrey's presence on the big screen had definitely become less and less. And this wasn't because people got sick of him or that he wasn't getting roles anymore. This was by choice.
Don't get me wrong, Jim Carrey is a great character, and I was lucky to get the part. But I don't think of that as me anymore.
There'd be these long periods of time where you wouldn't hear anything from Jim Carrey, and then just randomly, he would show up in some weird interview acting strange and saying something kind of controversial.
There's no meaning to any of this, so I wanted to find the most meaningless thing that I could come to and join, and here I am.
People go, what the hell, man? You're supposed to make 2.5 movies a year. Yeah. That's playing to a demographic, and I don't want to do that ever.
But everyone was still wondering what was happening to Jim Carrey. Something was going on. Good or bad, something was happening.
People say, well, I have a soul. You don't have a soul. There's no you, but I feel like there is a soul, and it includes everything.
Yeah. Every few years, a new clip of him talking about spirituality or talking about life would pop up, and it would go super viral.
You can spend your whole life imagining ghosts, worrying about the pathway to the future, but all there will ever be is what's happening here, and the decisions we make in this moment, which are based in either love or fear.
The happy place is realizing that you're everything, and that there's no real you involved in the first place. Depression only happens when you don't accept what is, and when you're playing a character in life. So when I tried to go back and play Jim Carrey, I got depressed.
His insights were surprisingly very deep, and he would talk about lots of things, but sometimes he would go at Hollywood, celebrity, and stardom. There'd be an article in August 15th, 2018, where he really criticized Hollywood, saying, "I just don't want to be in the business anymore. I didn't like what was happening. The corporations taking over and all of that." And these days, the film industry has a lot more corporate pressure on it. Every film needs to be very successful, and that box can become small and confining, and for Jim Carrey, it doesn't really work. A lot of his films that came out in the 90s were very risky. He was a new actor on the scene, you know, he was untested. These days, that would be way too much of a risk to pump all that money into something that we don't know is going to work. It's much better that we make Fast and Furious 74.
All the comics and show business don't know what this is. Right?
And so it seems to me that maybe Jim Carrey is a bit weird. Maybe he's quite eccentric.
Shut it down now.
Maybe a little bit conspiratorial, you know, who knows?
People in sitcoms have been hired by the government to throw you off the track, to distract you, to make you laugh and stuff like that, make you happy and docile so you don't know what's really going on.
But it really does seem that he's found some kind of peace.
I have enough. I've done enough. I am enough.
Now, as much as you are still open to creating and doing new things, you know, you did recently share that you're ready to take a break from acting. Can you elaborate on that comment?
I feel like there's so many things, because I've been so busy for so long, that important things that I've ignored.
It seems as though he lives relatively out the way. He really stays out the spotlight now. But occasionally he will pop up in some projects. He worked on Sonic recently, and he's also on this TV show called Kidding. I've got to take my hat off to Jim Carrey. He was a legend. He still is a legend. That one man has put the smile on many faces of a generation.
That's your sweet spot right there.
And with that, I will say good morning.
Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
If you enjoyed this, please join us on the Afters podcast, where we talk about all these kind of topics and many more.